Welcome, everyone. This is Pastor Bob, and it's time for our midweek message. And we've shifted gears with our messages, and we're focusing more on Lent and the season of Lent and talking about things that we should give up. We're doing that both on Sundays and doing our midweek messages, and the idea is to give up things that cause a barrier between us and God and us and other people. One of the easiest things to give up is judgment. Jesus says unambiguously over and over not to judge. Now, I know that's a big subject. Obviously, if it's 12 o'clock at night and someone is trying to shimmy in through your window and they're well armed, you need to make a judgment. You're not just going to say, well, hey, I'm not judging. Go ahead and rob us or whatever your intentions are. No, that we can assess the situation relatively quickly without knowing the totality of the person and say this situation is a bad situation and then act on it accordingly. When Jesus is talking about judging other people, it's just that, judging the person, the heart, the mind, the soul. And those are things we really don't know about another person, even if we know them very well. Even if we have spent a lot of time with them, we don't know deeply what's going on. We don't know what motivates them. A lot of times we don't know someone's background, their past, their future. We don't know what God is going to do with them in the future. So judgment should only be reserved for God. Matter of fact, if you look at most characters in the Bible, whether it be David or Solomon, Paul, Peter, Lot, I could keep going. All of those people were deeply flawed people who did some pretty rough stuff, and it's mentioned right in Scripture. Yet God rose them up because of what was in their hearts and their faithfulness. God can see the whole person beyond whatever action it is we are trying to evaluate. And so as Christians, especially in a church setting or in interactions with other people, we should not judge. The Bible actually tells us what we should do in lieu of judgment, and that is exercise grace. And that is a great spiritual practice during this Lenten season. Wake up in the morning, when you say your morning prayers or your prayer to God, say, God, help me to be the most graceful, loving person I can. Now I get it, don't tune me out. I know there's a lot of folks that say, hey, oh, that church stuff, you're always talking about love and grace. I don't need that. Don't turn me out. Listen, being graceful or gentle is not weakness or being mamby-pamby. That is strength under control. See, God's grace is the unmerited, undeserved love of God. God is not weak. God is not frail. God is not ambiguous. God is all-powerful, yet he takes that strength and controls it. And instead of acting on that strength, which he could easily do, he shares his grace. And we ought to do the same. So it's not a weakness. It's not a deficit of character. It's taking the grace that God has given us. Remember, it's unmerited and undeserved. We don't deserve it any more than the next person, yet God gives it to us freely. We ought to do the same. Without judgment, without reference, without mentally noting, is this person deserved of this grace? It's funny, Paul says that let no debt remain outstanding except the debt to love one another. What does that mean? Well, when we meet somebody, according to Scripture, before we know them, before we've had time to evaluate them, before we compare what we know of them against some subconscious or conscious criteria that we have formed, we owe them a debt of love. And what comes with that love is grace. Paul says, let no debt remain outstanding. That debt is there a priori before we even knew that person. Respect you can earn, love we give freely, grace we give freely. And so my encouragement this Lent is in all of our interactions. And I would say this is so needed in our polarized world where online and in person people are judging other people because of their political views or a particular view on a social issue. I have seen families divided, churches divided. I've seen people, they can agree on 99% of the multiplicity of things we argue about. But it comes to one issue, and all of a sudden they're judging that person. You're not a Christian. You're not a real, it's gotten a little bit bonkers. And it's a shame because now Christians are getting known among the culture for being judgmental and narrow-minded and unable to accept people who think differently than them. And I'm talking about all different Christians, left-wing Christians, right-wing Christians, centrist Christians. People blanket the whole of us as being this very negative perception. It's up to us to change that. We need to be seen as people of grace. God gave it to us freely. We couldn't earn it. We don't deserve it. And we should respond the same. How can we receive something and then turn around and not give that same thing to somebody else? Jesus has a parable about a person who was forgiven debts. And he runs out, and instead of forgiving the debts to the people that owe him, he's rather harsh with them, sometimes charging them quite a bit more. Jesus is pretty upset. We ought to be people of grace. And the only way to become that is to practice it every day. Start with a prayer. Dear Lord, help me to be the most graceful person I can. And you know what? It's okay to be real honest and say, God, this is hard today. It's really hard in this group of people I work with, or it's really hard with these family members. That's okay. Go ahead, let God know, ask for strength, but just say, Lord, help me to be as graceful to others as you have been to me. It's a great practice. Eliminate judgment, replace it with grace. Wonderful spiritual discipline. And here's what you'll find. You will find mentally and emotionally and spiritually, when you no longer feel the need to judge people, a huge weight off your shoulders. You're like, I'm not responsible for that person. I don't know anything about that person. All I got to do is love them and show grace. Huge weight off your shoulders. All you have to do is love them and be graceful and be God for other people. And that feeling that you get throughout the day is so much lighter, so much more, to use the word again, graceful. You no longer feel that burden to judge and evaluate and maintain a combative stance with said person over whatever issue. You're just free to love and be graceful. And it's probably one of the most freeing feelings you'll ever get in the spiritual life. All right, I'll see you guys Sunday. Thanks.